Q&A with Christophe.
Q&A with Christophe.
Q&A with Christophe.
Hello, welcome. This is episode 7 of my little series about Q&A. This time the question comes from Manda. She's from the US, and she asked what my views are on alternative proteins and which ones I see as most successful in the future. Well, first, my views on alternative protein is that I welcome them. It's always good to have alternatives, especially in uncertain times. It's good to diversify, so I think the more possibilities we have to feed the world, the better. That said, of course, the term of alternative protein is always presented as if it's all about replacing meat, and all the statistics that I see show that actually meat is not going away anytime soon at all. On the contrary, meat consumption is going to increase in the world. Especially poultry is going to do really well, and chicken, well, eggs not being meat but animal protein nonetheless. There is going to be doing well in terms of volume. Aquaculture, I think, is tremendous potential. Beef, which has always a bad rap, actually should remain fairly close to the current levels. Pork might increase a little bit more, but nonetheless there's still going to be a lot of meat consumed, and let's face it, alternative proteins are not in a position today to replace all the meat that's consumed. So which ones I see as the most successful? Well, that's a little difficult to say. Let's maybe look back a little bit, because I remember, I think it was in 2010, I had been interviewed. That was by Vice, and they were asking me about food of the future and my views on insects. And I was explaining them, I think insects are a possibility, but there is no point in trying to force Westerners to eat crickets. It's not in our culture. Westerners, especially from Northern Europe and from North America, they don't want to crunch on things. They don't want little bits all over in their mouths. There are other cultures where they love to nibble on a little gristle and cartilage and then spit them out, but that's not the way Westerners are. Westerners, they want something meaty, they want something soft, and I was mentioning to them the example of snails, for instance. In France it's a delicacy, and I was in Burgundy a couple of months ago, and I enjoy snails, and that's meaty, and it's very good when it's well prepared. Same thing, what I was telling them by then was that if you look at it, insects, if you compare that with lobsters or shrimp, it looks pretty much the same. So insects are just shrimp that live in the air, but why not? If you can find species that offer you a meaty product. So as long as we don't do that, then I don't see much success in the West. And I never really believed that we would make people eat crickets here. There had been attempts. Well, first the price they were asking was ridiculous. That was pretty close to the price of caviar. So the average person is never going to switch to that. Yeah, that's not the market. And my view, and I also put that in my website, I think it was in 2010, my views were that I saw a lot more possibilities for insects to be used as an ingredient in animal feed. And guess what? This is really what has been happening over the last couple of years. And you see large corporations like Cargill, like Tyson Foods, they also go in that direction, basically to use it as a feed ingredient. For a very simple reason. If you look in nature, chickens eat worms, they eat insects, that's very normal. Fish also use insects. There is a reason why it's called fly fishing. It's because fly is one of the natural feeds of trout, for instance. So yeah, there is a possibility, but let's not try to push things that people don't want to eat. Doesn't work. Doesn't work on 2 years old when you try to make them eat broccoli. It's not going to work with adults if you want them to eat bugs. That's just that simple. So in other alternative proteins, well, there's been the plant-based thing, especially trying to mimic the meat with technology, which is all the great thing within technology, and I didn't see that really being very successful either. And I remember, I think it was in 2019, I was doing a presentation and I was explaining why. And it was so wrong in terms of cost, in terms of marketing, in terms of segmentation. I didn't see any possibility that first they would make money, that first they would already grow significant sales at that kind of price level. And yeah, I got some bad looks from people, were from companies who, of course, were very interested to sell their ingredients to that industry. But no, and on top of that, well, the nutritional profile was so different from meat. Frankly, I didn't see any chance, and that's exactly what has happened. And I was kind of alone by then, and nobody really thought that I was right. But yeah, we've seen Beyond Meat and all is basically kind of it's a low level, and I don't think there's going to be any major excitement on that in the near future. And you hardly hear about it, about plant-based alternatives to meat. The companies were all going, you know, the Cargills, the Nutricos, the Vion in Holland, the GBS, I don't hear anymore Brazil Foods and all. I don't hear that about plant-based. There is a market, let's face it, but I always believe that when it comes to plant-based, basically it's going to be kind of the old-fashioned vegan and vegetarian recipes, traditional recipes with wholesome ingredients, not things that have been processed to death. Those are not the ones going to succeed. Those traditional vegetarian and vegan alternatives, they are the ones that are going to stay, going to win. Then the following, of course, that is the lab meat. Well, that's also something I was mentioning in my first book. I was talking to the people developing it in the Netherlands in 2009. And by then they were saying that within 5 years, well, it would be on the supermarket shelves, and so that would have been 2014, and well, we know that it's not the case. I found that was quite ambitious. I remember at first I was kind of like, cellular meat didn't seem to be appealing, but then I was realizing, okay, it depends for what kind of application. And I think there are some applications where it can work, but once again, let's not think that that's going to replace all the animal farming just like that. It's not going to happen. They're still struggling with costs. And same thing, I hear less and less about it. I don't think that the appetite from investors is quite high. I think now they're all excited with artificial intelligence and they move in another direction. And I haven't seen really any significant breakthrough. Once in a while, yeah, there is a price release and they promise things, but I think it's more at the period when they need some more money to keep funding their operations. But I think there's still a long way. And well, recently there's been the story of a company called Upside Foods with cellular chicken meat, and well, it seemed that well, it was not as efficient and produced the way they claim it was not in incubators, but maybe just a small bottle samples. So anyway, that has also thrown a very, very poor light on the cellular meat sector. And yeah, the only thing I really hear is there have been some lobster alternative, but doesn't seem to go very far. There's some work on bluefin tuna, which could make sense considering the cost, bluefin tuna being an expensive product. But there again, this is not with that kind of price level that you can really convince the average consumer to switch from, let's say, animal farming to meat produced in incubators. And the thing is, those incubators, they also need to have a fuel. And if you take all the chain, the entire chain and all the externalities, well, is it all that much more sustainable? I don't know. And I don't see any thorough research on that, so I have my doubts. But it could happen, who knows, but I think it's going to take some time before they can really have a critical mass, being able to have costs that bring a product that is competitive. But never say never. We'll see. So we hear less and less. What seems to be more the topic that excites investors and excites a little bit the people in the protein world is precision fermentation, which is not as such a new technique. Has been done, but to produce, for instance, insulin, produce molecules. So basically, you take bacteria, you insert a gene that's going to make you produce a very specific protein, and then it produces that protein. Well, we also have to see about, in terms of cost, producing a very specific protein for the pharmaceutical sector is one thing. Produce mass food, that's a totally different story. So we'll see. Recently there have been some noise about eggs. Well, it's mostly albumin because we don't do the yolk anyway. Once again, never say never, but we're going to have to see where this is going. But yeah, let's have people work on alternatives, because the more alternatives we have, like I said at the beginning, the better.
If you're interested in my videos, please click on the subscribe button, or you can also visit my website.